Sorry, that's my southern accent.
Oh, me, yes. Here, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Martin.
Here.
Commissioner Warwick.
Here.
Commissioner Brown.
Yes.
Commissioner Kiesling.
Here.
Counselor Beshad.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
All right, so stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So, election of officers. Jessica, you want to
Yeah, sure.
so on
So,
how we do that?
first of all, thank you all for coming and doing this. I think it's been like a decade since we had a planning commission.
At least.
So, it's a decade. Wow.
So it has been some time. And you were on the planning commission before. I don't think anyone else was. So you probably have more experience than any of us here on how these things actually run. So you just correct me if you see me doing anything wrong. But according to the code book, the commission shall select a president and vice president who shall be voting members and who shall hold office for 1 calendar year unless removed or replaced by a majority of the planning commission. So I know some of you know each other and some of you don't. If anyone is interested in, I don't know, we could do some introductions. You can tell each other a little bit about yourselves before we get to the voting part, because we're going to be meeting on a regular basis. So let's start by getting to know each other.
Sounds good.
So I guess we'll just go this way. I'll start with you.
Start with Steve.
I'm Steve Kiesling. I've been in Gold, well, I've been around here about 20 years, I guess, something like that.
Oh, if you want to move that microphone closer. So we have noticed in this streaming that people have a hard time hearing you, so make sure you lean towards the microphone closest to you when you're talking, and if you don't, you don't, but you'll get the hang of it.
Okay, I guess I'm the outside of town. I live on Upper River Road, and but I own the property above Beach Park that once was we had a yellow dome and rented inner tubes for a summer a long time ago. And I'm here in town because I love it, and also been working on this whitewater idea for way too long. But anyway, I'm interested in seeing the town develop and glad to be here.
So I'm Malia Beachide, and I'm on city council, and I'm here just to be a liaison. I won't actually participate. Maybe Jessica can kind of explain a little bit more about what that role is supposed to look like.
Yeah, so I mean, you can participate in the debates on their decisions, but when it comes to the actual voting on decisions, it's up to them and not to you. I mean, really, you're a full member except you can't vote.
Yes. Margaret?
I'm Margaret Giles, and I lived here for a really long time in Gold Hill, 36 years, I realize. And I live right across the street. So somehow it's been convenient to participate in city meetings, I guess. But I was on the council for a long time, and I was a planning commission chair for a long time. So, long history.
My name is Wendy Brown. Should I, Mike?
Oh,
Can everybody hear me okay? Okay.
Well, it's about the people's, because it's being streamed, so we
yeah,
can.
if you just want to move
they
it
can-
closer.
Okay. Is it on?
It should be.
Yeah,
You
okay.
can turn it on.
My name is Wendy Brown. I'm a newer member to Gold Hill. I live down on 360, right on the river. Been here for a little over a year and a couple of months. I have my own business here in Gold Hill, consultancy I've had for 15 years, and sorry, I've been in Southern Oregon though for 20 years. So originally from California, originally Bay Area, and then Southern California, and love it here. I love Gold Hill. I'm a small town. I should have been born in a small town. I've always said that. I love quaintness. I love, knowing your neighbors. So I'm really excited about that. My consulting business is working with cities and counties. So I've been supporting cities and counties for over 20 years. So while I've never been a planner, I've hired a lot of planners or facilitated the interviews for planners. My consultancy is HR services. We do a lot of executive search. So hired a lot of planning managers and directors and planners. So I have an idea of what the commission's supposed to do. Just never been on one. I've never been in an appointed or an elected position, but looking forward to serving. And that's me.
Hello, my name's Ken Martin. City resident here, just been here 7 years. Looking forward to see and have a little bit of say-so in how our city grows, and planning and how that takes place. First time in public office or service in any of that manner, so a lot to learn.
Mark Warwick, a lot of you know me. I was previously on council in 2016 for 6 months. Lived in town for 28 years. Live up on the east end of Fifth Avenue. My background is in public works, wastewater treatment. I was a 37-year employee at the City of Medford Water Reclamation Facility. So, interested in helping the town. So.
And one final introduction. Ryan, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ryan Nolan, and I work with Rogue Valley Council of Governments. So I work for the small towns, mostly in Josephine and Jackson County. I work with Cave Junction, I work with Grants Pass, Jacksonville, Gold Hill, Rogue River, Shady Cove, sometimes Jackson County. So I provide as much assistance in land use planning as the city needs. So I'm available, and in the past, in Gold Hill, that's typically been staff report writing when there is a large land use decision request, and sometimes presentations to the city council. So in the past, that had been done by Dick Converse. I've been doing this for about a year already, and we'll talk more when we get into the subject item tonight and then the discussion later, but I'm glad
So
to...
are you essentially the city planner?
Yes, I would be considered the city planner on a contract basis with the city of Gold Hill. Yep. So again, glad to be here. I also enjoy small towns and am glad to see people involved and wanting good things for Gold Hill. So.
Thanks.
Thanks.
So,
Yeah.
election of officers, so they need to make a nomination for president? Is that how that would work?
That's basically how that works. I mean, that whole one sentence is our whole guidance.
Our whole guidance, okay.
Yeah.
So I'd say if any of you want to recommend or nominate one or the other of you for president, and then we'll...
Is there anybody interested in doing that? Mark, I kind of like your background in public works.
Yeah, but I have no planning background, so.
It's not
do have
essential,
someone that
Mark.
does.
You do
Well,
a great job. You would.
Yeah.
Would you be interested?
Only unless no one else is, put it that way.
How about VP? Should
Yeah,
we get back to you on VP?
Sure, I would do that.
Is there anybody interested in doing president?
Wendy, you want to do it? Maybe you should.
No, I think I want to be a member, not a president, but, yeah. Just limited time, just want to make sure that I'm able to commit to that.
You know we're all looking at you.
I've done it before, so
I think that makes sense, that would be great.
no.
Great.
I don't think it would be good. I think it needs to be somebody different, and I think you learn a lot by doing it. So
Can I ask a question? How much extra time does it take to be president?
it depends on how seriously you take it. I found that it took some time because I always read all the information before and
Sure.
looked up all the ordinances and researched any questions that
Which
came
we
to
probably
us.
all should be doing, right?
Yes. But having a city planner is wonderful. I relied on Dick Converse a lot. There's just so much you can look up, and sometimes you need to ask an expert, and we hire one, so.
So you're, am I hearing that it doesn't really take much more time than being a regular commissioner?
A
or
little
what's-
more.
It
A li-
does.
Yeah, I think it does.
In addition to just preparing for the meetings, what other, I'm just trying to facilitate the conversation a little bit, what else does the president need to do?
Read a lot of scripts if there's some sort of a land use hearing. You need to get used to reading words like ex parte and things like that real quickly. That's about it. And just be fair, when people come and talk to, because you represent the city during the meeting. I think it's relatively easy. And I realize that our new planner has provided instructions about what you need to do. And if you read all the instructions, it's kind of simple, I think, if you're well prepared. You can't just shoot from the hip and make stuff up. That is a very bad idea.
Sure.
But what I loved about planning before is it's either legal or it's not. There's not a lot of gray area. So you just do the fair thing. So.
Well, if nobody else is going to do it, if it doesn't take that much more time, I guess I could do it if nobody else is going to stay.
You'd really learn about all the ordinances and everything. It's interesting. Yeah.
Shall I call for a vote?
That sounds like a nomination to me.
I think so.
All in favor of electing Commissioner Brown as president, say aye.
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 Those not in favor, say no. Hearing none, I think you just elected Wendy Brown as president.
It'll be fun.
It'll be okay, Wendy.
You'll do great.
And we'll just repeat the process for vice president.
Everybody looks at Mark.
I'd like to nominate Mark
Mark.
for vice president.
I'll accept.
Okay, all those in favor of having Mark for vice president, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Hearing none, you've just elected Mark. Okay, great. Congratulations. Now, I think we can move on to 3 on the agenda, site plan review. And I don't really know exactly how this goes.
Right, so here's the thing. Normally, what the city of Gold Hill has been doing for the last couple of years, and I'm not sure when this happened, it happened at some point by verbal agreement. There was nothing written down on paper, but the city of Gold Hill agreed that small things like fence permits, things that don't take 5 people to vote on to decide, it's just, does it fit the property line, does it meet the setback, basic stuff. We just kicked that to Dick Converse. And when he retired and Ryan took over, he just passed that on to Ryan. During this last hearing that we had, it came to light that our code book actually says everything goes before the planning commission. And so that's why we're coming.
Have one.
Now that we have one,
Yeah.
which is why we have one now, so everything can come here. Now, if at some point, you decide that that was the best thing to do, that you don't need to hear about every fence that goes up, then I suggest we do something and actually get it in writing this time. But we can deal with that down the road. I just want to be aware, normally the planning commission hasn't recently, because there hasn't been one, heard anything like this. No, well, since there wasn't a planning commission, the council has been acting as the planning commission, so there have been land use hearings that have come before the council, but nothing like a fence request.
Right.
So I wanted to pick something easy tonight so that we could start with and go through
Really
the
appreciate
process. Go through the process and see what it was like. But just know that at some point, if you decide, hey, we do want to kick all this kind of stuff back to Ryan, because not that it happens a lot. These don't happen all the time, but we'll learn as we go. So that's why we're doing a site plan review on a fence request tonight. We will start, and I don't have a script for this since it's not something we normally do, but normally we start with staff comments, then the applicant will come up and present his case, then if there's anyone who's opposed to it, they would say why they're opposed to it, and the applicant would come back up and make a rebuttal to that. did I get everything? That's about it. So, yeah, that's where we are, and I'll turn it over to Ryan for the staff report.
So I'm going to do a real brief, what is land use discussion for you. So
Sure.
in the state of Oregon, there are very specific laws about how municipalities, cities, and counties deal with land use decisions. Most of that started in the 1970s, and there's a pretty interesting history of how it all came out. So what essentially we have now are 19 statewide land use goals. They aren't specific demands of jurisdictions, but they're goals that we're all supposed to work towards. And there was an email that went out that included that. Some of you might have it in your junk mail. So that's important to understand that across the whole state of Oregon, everybody is supposed to be working towards these 19 goals, and there are different ways to get there. So all cities are supposed to identify how they get there through a comprehensive land use plan. So the city of Gold Hill has one that was adopted in 1984, and it basically says, here are the goals of the state of Oregon, and here is how Gold Hill is trying to reach them in providing residential land, and providing a street system that works, and protecting natural resources, all of those kinds of things. So then, based on that comprehensive plan, we have in our municipal code a series of land use code that really dictates how we approach applications for use of property. So whenever somebody has a request, they want to build a fence, they want to build a house, they want to do something, there's typically a process where the city can approve that. And it's supposed to be approved based on your adopted comprehensive plan and your adopted municipal code, which has some development or land use code in it. So the current municipal code is available on the city's website, which is handy. So I think at some point maybe we can get people who want them printed copies, but it's a really good thing to be able to access it online. Is really, really good for the applicant who's looking to build something and you as a decision maker. So we also have, I think it's the last page in your packet, we have zoning. So across the city we have a comprehensive plan designation of what should be commercial, what should be industrial, what should be residential, and then we have specific zones for each lot. So tonight we have a request for a fence permit. In most jurisdictions, fences would be approved at the counter. It's a pretty basic process. But because of our existing code, which is in chapter 17, which is supposed to be land use, 17, section 48.020, required approval of the site plan shall be made by the planning commission. And there's some other language. But so again, we always try to follow what is the adopted code that the city's already approved. So if we look at the application, property is 668 6th Avenue North. It's kind of hard to identify in your map, but it's a light blue and it's designated R1. So that zone is a low-density residential zone. In land use, it's pretty important to identify which zone you're in because there are different sections of the code that apply to each land use zone. So then we look at what standard do we have for fences, and that's in, again, chapter 17, the land use section, fences, and most importantly is 17.56.010, section A. Fences, walls, hedges, and screen planting may be located in any required front yard, provided that they do not exceed 3 1/2 feet in height. And the front yard is the required yard in front of the house. And then section B, said fences, walls, hedges, and screen planting may be located in any rear yard or side yard, provided they do not exceed 6 feet in height. So what's the required front yard? So we have to go to section 17.16.120, which discusses building setbacks. And that's the page that has the picture of the house with the street and the side street. And section A1, residential uses single family, which is what we're looking at. A minimum setback of 20 feet is required. except that an enclosed porch may be within 15 feet. So in R1 zoning, we require 20 feet of a front yard. That's from the property line to the front of the house. In that area, according to the fence section of the code, the fence can be 3.5 feet high. Then on the side and the back, it can be 6 feet high. So then we go back and look at the application. The property owner wants to put a 6-foot-high fence down the full side yard. So as staff, I would recommend that the Planning Commission approve the request with the condition that they meet the front yard height standard of 3.5 feet for the first 20 feet back from 6th Street. So that's kind of a walkthrough of how I would look at this application and my suggestion for the Planning Commission. And if there are any questions about the process or the specific code, I'd be happy to talk about that with you.
So that was my question. So if it's a request for 6 feet when it gets to the street in front of the house, is that for sight? So people can see over the fence when they're pulling out of their property? Or?
So most cities have some kind of a requirement that the fence in the front yard is lower. Exactly what the height is changes from community to community. I think most of it was built around the automobile process. When people had driveways and cars, the idea was it's aesthetic that a 8-foot tall fence isn't in everybody's front yard, but it's also a safety concern if people are walking down the street and there's a narrow gate with an 8-foot tall fence, you couldn't see a pedestrian. So I think that's where it really came from.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I'm just trying to clarify from my own knowledge. So where it comes into the front yard for 20 feet, it would have to taper from 6 feet to 3?
Our code says it would be 3.5 feet, 20
For
feet
20.
back,
Oh.
and then it could go to 6 feet tall.
Thank you.
And basically, that would line up with the front of where you could build a new house. We have existing houses that may not meet that setback requirement. That can also be a challenge in Gold Hill. There are a lot of houses that are 100 years old. Clearly, they were not built with the current standards, so some things don't align.
So does anyone have any questions for Ryan? Mr. Nolan?
So one, just while we're talking about it, because this is a good practice run for more complicated land use hearings in the future. The most important thing that I would urge you to remember is make your decision based on what the city has already adopted in the code, and you're doing your job. If the decision becomes, I think that's bad, I think that's good, I like that person, I don't like that person, that's not the appropriate task. If you don't like what the code says, you should work as a planning commission to recommend changes to the city council to
That was my
change
next
the code.
question. So there might be some codes that are either outdated or they don't
So,
work effectively.
There absolutely are, and I'm hoping that you'll all work with me over the course of the next year. I plan to get it in front of the people to make the changes here, because a lot of this stuff was adopted years ago.
84.
We've made other changes
Yeah.
since then, and some of them contradict each other.
Right.
So yeah, that is something I plan on working on over the course of the next year, is updating the code book. And I guess land use, when you change things in the land use portion, it has to be, you just have to have public hearings.
So there's state laws about how you change the land use code. So you have to provide notice to the Department of Land Conservation and Development 45 days in advance of any change to your development code. It gives them an opportunity to see, are you creating new code that still aligns with your comprehensive plan and meets all of the laws of the state? And you also have to notify people who would be impacted by the change. So maybe specific zoned properties or maybe the whole city, depending on your change.
We're not ready to do that yet.
And our code clearly lines out what type of process you're supposed to go through for a subdivision or several other options, including a code change. So there are lots of, we look at our own code and we look at state law when we're making changes or decisions. So if there aren't any other questions, I know the applicant's here and he may have information
So
for the planning commission.
I've got one question
Sure.
in that. So the code, the existing Gold Hill code doesn't specifically, regarding side fences, doesn't specifically talk about the setback, at least the way I'm interpreting this. So are we interpreting that the 3-foot height of the fence, 3.5 foot on the setback is applicable for the first 20 feet? Is that an interpretation we're making?
I don't think it's an interpretation. I think it's very clear. So
Okay,
if you're going to build the
to
house,
understand.
you could build it up to the side yard, up to the backyard,
Sure,
and there's a front yard. So
right,
our setback has a very specific perimeter.
okay,
So I think in your head, if you think there's this little rectangle in the front yard,
right,
that is the required front yard setback,
okay.
and that's 20 feet in residential.
Okay, so that would be considered, that side fence would be considered obviously part of the setback then?
Right.
And it would be subject to the 3.5 foot? Okay.
And this is an issue that I think people were really comfortable with the front yard fencing like from the 60s until the 2010s. In a lot of communities, people have been pushing to change that now. People like security, people like
Right.
fences that people can't step over to get into their yards. They like fences that dogs can't get out of. So it is an issue people have been discussing. Most have kept some kind of front yard reduction in fence height.
Okay.
Okay.
So is this when Mr. Little can speak?
It is.
Thanks, Ryan.
Well, good evening. My name is Robert Lowe, and I live at 668 6th, just up the street here. And for those who don't know me, I brought a visual aid. As Ryan adequately described it, I'm basically building a fence in my yard. Just the brief history is that when we purchased the home, we also had to purchase all the land that went with it. So unfortunately, we have what were 4 tax lots, which is about 3 too many. So they actually, however, many years ago, were divided into 2 parcels. I don't know why the prior owner did that, but they did it. So I have 2 tax lots, each one with one 50 by 100 lot. But at any rate, I am requesting permission to build a wooden fence to replace an existing hog wire and chicken wire fence, which is wholly inadequate. And the whole reason that I'm doing it at this point in time is to keep my dog in. Because anybody who's come by my house has met Baron, who's a very vocal golden retriever, and he just loves getting into that part of my property from which he can escape. So the wood fence is largely designed to keep Baron in the yard at this point, but it also is a property line. So before I started this whole process, I came and checked with the city manager, got a copy of the fence codes from the clerk, and familiarized myself with what was allowed. And since I'm one who believes in sort of leading by example, I thought it was really important that I get a permit and do this all appropriately, because I've been in this town since 1980, and I know a lot of people just throw things up and decide, well, if they get caught and get in trouble, they'll deal with it later. And that's not how I wanted to do things. So that's why I'm here. It's pretty straightforward. It's a fence. I didn't interpret the sign ordinances as you do, Brian. I understand the 3.5 foot ruling for the front yard, and I took that to be rather literal, that if I was building a front fence, it would be covered. I didn't see in the ordinance that a side fence would be covered by that, but you're the planner, and if that's your interpretation, that's what I'll do. I guess I would ask the commission to, read over that and think if that's how you all interpret that to be. I don't have a problem with it exactly, but it's not like a side fence on a
Question for you,
street.
Rob.
It's an internal fence. you
What
know.
is the setback on your house? Judging by this, it appears to be
It's not.
grandfathered in close.
Mine is one of those 100-year homes, and I would say my home, the front porch is probably 12 feet in from the property line, and the house itself is close to 20. But it probably couldn't be sited where it is today if I was building it new, but it was built in 1920. So, but again, the fence, as you can see from my diagram, which you've got a copy of, it's like an internal fence. It's within my yard. It's not on an edge on a street or anything like that. But that's pretty much it. I just wanted to.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
So what's going to be on either side of that fence? Is there going to be a driveway on either
No.
side of this fence? Or
No,
any cars?
it's just an internal fence replacing a fence
Okay. Do you have a fence that comes up to that on both sides?
on both sides.
So-
On both ends,
Yeah, both ends
north
of
and
the
south,
fence?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So there's a fence that actually already goes across both sides. So if I'm looking at this map,
Mhm.
there's already a fence here and there's already a fence here.
Yeah, the perimeter of my property is all fenced with a picket fence.
Okay.
And this particular fence is already there, but as I mentioned, it's just an old wire fence. Been there 50 years.
So there's no way that there's going to be any traffic that's going to be going through there out because it's already enclosed within a fence.
It's already
So
enclosed.
it is an
within-
internal
yeah.
fence because there's already fences. on the
Exactly,
other
so
side.
other than deer, no traffic. Yeah, and so, no, it's, like I say, it's an internal fence within my yard, just replacing an inadequate.
Without actually seeing the property, it's kind of hard to tell.
Sure.
Like, you know, unless you knew that it was already fencing on both sides.
Yeah, so the fence I'm proposing to build is north-south,
Yeah.
and yes, the front and back were already fenced.
And
Right.
how tall are the existing fences?
They're picket fence, they're probably three and a half feet, I guess I'd say. Just open pickets, been there 100 years, literally. That's about it, I guess.
So is that determined your front yard? Where is your front yard then? Where is your front yard in your house diagram?
Do I have a front yard? My house is quite close to the street. So the front yard is between my front porch and 6th Avenue.
Okay.
And again, it's an old craftsman style home, so there's an enclosed front porch, which is part of my front yard. But there's also 10, 12 feet buffer, just of plants and gravel and such things.
And you want to put a 6-foot interior up to your picket, your 3-foot?
Mhm. Just because the 6-foot fence seemed like the normal side yard fence.
Sure.
And at some point in time, my hope is to sell off some of my property, because again, I don't need all this. And I would think that would make it more attractive to somebody who might want that lot, that separate lot. But, yeah, so, any questions?
If you were to sell off that lot, where would is there a designated like driveway? Would there ever be a driveway on the other side of that? Could there?
Well,
Is it all
the
open?
driveway would be wherever the person who builds a home can legally place it. You know, they've got 50-foot frontage, and so, I don't know, I don't think I would have anything to do with that. They'd come before you.
Right, yeah. Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you for your questions.
So you had planned on doing a 6-foot high fence all over.
Correct.
this, but according to code, you're gonna have to go 3.5 feet.
Sounds like that, yeah.
20 feet back.
From the property
Yeah.
line,
Right,
from the property line.
okay.
Okay, yeah, and if that's what I have to do, that's fine, I'm compliant.
Can I talk to Ryan? Ryan, can I ask you a quick question? Is that okay? He's done?
Yeah, he's here.
I yield the floor.
President, you can make the rules.
What?
You're president. so-
Oh. The question I have is based on what you just heard. This is more of an interior fence. with the question mark of, well, we don't know what may end up being built on the other side at some point in the future, or that could be somebody's backyard, so it doesn't really matter. It also could be somebody's driveway, but if somebody's building a home there and they're gonna put their driveway up next to the fence, I guess at that point, we could make the requirement that it be 3.5 feet. But based on what you heard, this being, in this diagram, do you still think that it needs to be 20 feet based on the code? Do you think it still
Yeah.
needs to be 20 feet back?
Our code doesn't have a fence diagram, but most communities that have a diagram explaining fence height really show that the front yard, even down the sides, has a limited height. So that's my experience, that the 20-foot front yard setback would include any fence within the first 20 feet of that property. So that's my interpretation. I think if the planning commission chose to find a different interpretation, that would be their choice. But I do think your point is a little, what happens on either side, on the other side of that fence, somebody could put a driveway right next to the fence, and then so
Yeah.
I stand by my recommendation.
Yeah, and
It's not something to
No,
die over, or.
yeah.
But usually you're considering clear view on a corner, but that is not a corner.
Yeah, that's what I was going to point out. So the book says, walls and fences within front yards shall additionally comply with division clearance standards in 1756-20. And this says that it's at the intersection of two streets, or a street and a railroad, which is where it should be maintained. And it doesn't say in the middle of a block. It says in
No.
an intersection or a corner.
But yeah, that would technically be a corner, and I'm wondering, I mean, it's nice that Rob is willing to do whatever is legal, and I think that's great, but it may be legal for him
But it's not a
to-
quarter. He wants the fence in the middle of the block.
Uh-huh.
He wants
So
the fence in the middle
what
of the
about-
block.
I understand that, but he doesn't have to consider clear view, because it's in the
I would
middle
agree
of
with
his
that.
right.
Vision clearance does not apply in this situation.
Right. So this wouldn't have to be shorter in the front.
He's saying it's considered in the front yard.
It is the front yard.
Because
So it
it's the
actually
front
looks
yard.
like 17.56 A.
So my understanding is, even internally, if you wanted to build, say, a garden fence in your backyard, if it's behind the first 20 feet, it can be 6 feet tall. But if it's anywhere in the front 20 feet of the yard, it's supposed to only be 3.5 feet tall.
And so
We may
since-
not all comply with that. That's,
So since he's got an irregular parcel, because it's historic, that's where it is, I guess, yeah.
One of those codes that maybe we should create some diagrams, which I think would be helpful. Or something that we could,
Yeah, because it has implications for other people, and it being, holding to the letter of the law doesn't really meet
I
the
think we should have
intent of
some
it.
flexibility to be able to say, but this code doesn't give us that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I think 20 feet is an awful lot of feet, even in, I think, most, areas, it's a lot of feet.
But that is our setback in the city, and you will run into that number over and over again as you hear different things.
Right.
Because that is the setback here.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand what Ryan's saying, and I mean, I have to agree it's right here in the code.
Right.
Yeah.
Setback, and I'm not sure there's a lot of wiggle room on this with regard to, unless there was some sort of a historical grandfathering that, but that's not really in the code, so. Is the fence going to be fairly close to the garage?
Yeah, right on that line. No, I'm bringing in about 5 feet.
Oh,
for-
5 feet,
May I?
sure.
I guess, I totally understand if I was putting a fence on my sidelines, then the need for that visibility, to see around the corner, see a car, see a pedestrian. Being an internal fence, I do kind of question the wisdom of applying this. In my case, I'm just doing it to contain my dog and maybe possibly something different. But you're going to get people who want to put up a 6-foot fence on their yard because they don't like the neighbor. The neighbors are not loud and noisy and their kid throws balls, and they're not gonna be real happy if we, the city, tell them, well, gosh, 20 feet of it's gotta be way down here. What they want is a privacy fence. I don't know, I just kind of question if that's really the intent of this, because I did read that. I got a copy of the code and I read over it. And totally understand the front being the front. I guess my interpretation's a little different, and I don't know that the setback area is still the front and would
So
be.
your garage is right on the street.
Yeah. Again,
So already we're dealing with a visibility issue that the fence is not gonna hinder.
oh yeah, the fence is set,
That's
the
what I'm
fence
looking
is
at, but
set
it's
back, from the
Right.
street considerably.
Right.
My property isn't right up on the street.
And don't you already have a tall fence there now? I mean, couldn't technically maybe your fence be grandfathered in along with the house and the garage?
Yeah, there already is, maybe hog wire fences are treated differently than wood fences, I don't know, but, just that, again, I'll do what the commission dictates. I'm not gonna raise a stink about it, but I just kinda wonder, again, if you are looking for privacy or security on a side yard, when they're dropping it down so low, really is what we want. And I think some people, if they come here and ask for this, are not gonna be happy being told they gotta do that. I totally get it if you're on a corner,
Yeah,
What if the other side of your house was the front of the house? Then that would be the side.
That's all. I just, I guess I read it a little differently, but,
So I-
he's the expert.
Can I have another question for you, Ryan? So what would be any potential ramifications if we approve the 6-foot fence out to as proposed here? Are there any potential caveats, ramifications?
We set precedent,
That's,
right?
that would be my only suggestion, is that it becomes difficult to enforce the code if you're making judgment calls on when and when it doesn't apply.
Sure.
It makes it harder to apply it if you want to apply a section of the code to somebody. It makes it harder for staff, but I think,
Sure.
the planning commission can make their own judgment on where that applies. If it's just the front fence on the street, or if it includes side fences, that could be a planning commission
Right.
decision.
This definitely is a section of the code that we should.
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna give us an easy one today.
Well,
I was just thinking
Be
that.
straightforward.
I mean, my sense is
I see
that,
the garage,
I mean, there's sufficient ambiguity in this that, I mean,
well, because
Yeah.
the code doesn't specifically define this situation.
right.
Right. It just assumes that a fence on that side of the yard is gonna be
Is a side
parallel to the
fence.
street. It doesn't, yeah.
It is a fence, but it's not a side fence to the property.
Yeah.
It's splitting the lot, so
and it's not gonna hinder anyone's view.
it's not
from the street.
specifically
But
identified
the
in the
garage already
code.
in place.
Where's the
And-
garage? Can you show me?
He's got a garage sitting out here on the street,
Oh.
and he's basically gonna come up to it with the
Yeah.
fence line, so
Yeah.
And could we approve a 6-foot fence with the notation that if this becomes a new lot for a house, then then that's revisited at some point?
or if there's a structure already in place that's grandfathered in, that, if you look at that as a side yard to that garage,
Yeah.
apply that.
Well, it's
Actually-
replacing an old fence, right, Rob?
It is.
And how
for what
tall
it's
is
worth,
that?
on the easternmost boundary of my property, between my property and the next property,
Uh-huh.
there is a 6-foot-high wooden fence that runs the entire, of course, that's been there 30 or 40 years, but, so, talking about precedent, there sort of is.
You already have one.
Yeah, we've already got one.
So it's difficult because it's a historic property that doesn't meet modern codes.
Correct.
So we have to think about what would be visually most sensible in a way for historic property, but we have to not set a precedent either,
All right.
or be clear in our language, because there are all these implications.
Because in this particular situation, with the garage being only 5 feet away, the fence is not going to impact sight lines because the garage is already there doing that.
Right.
So,
Is that a permanent garage?
Oh, it's been there for 100 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Taller than 6 feet tall, too,
Yes.
as I recall.
And again, I don't want to ask for some kind of, special consideration. If your opinion is it's got to be dropped down, I'll do that. I don't.
If the garage is already 6 feet tall, it doesn't.
Well, there's clearly no sightline issue,
No.
because there's such a setback from 6th Avenue to my front fence already. There's already a 15-foot setback there before my fences even begin. So there is no visual impact.
is the fence going to come out to the very front of the garage, or is it going to be back a couple feet at the end of the fence?
It's going to come to my existing picket fence line, which is set in a few feet.
From the front end of the garage?
Yeah, the garage pokes out into the street.
Okay.
So Ryan, did you find something else that you wanted to share with us?
I was just going to look up the non-conforming use section of the code. There's a code section that says if something, a non-conforming use or structure can remain if it was in place before a new code was adopted. And it talks about routine maintenance. But it doesn't, routine maintenance is allowed, but I don't know about changing a wire fence to a wood fence. I don't think that was,
Yeah.
I don't think that was clear in that
If
section.
it's falling
but-
down and not keeping his dog in, it's not doing his job as a fence and needs to be repaired.
So there is a section, 17.68, I think, that talks about pre-existing non-conforming uses or structures and that they can remain. So that might be an available option
Yeah.
for the planning commission to review if it's really
So I'm curious.
updating an existing.
You work for
fence.
Jacksonville also,
Correct.
and they have lots of historic properties that are incredibly irregular. I wonder how they handle things like that. If there's,
It depends on which district they're in, and if they're in the historic district, they're very strict on fence height. So if something isn't becoming more conforming, you really can't change an existing fence. But Jacksonville is a different,
yeah,
We don't have that
is
code.
a
Do you
different
have that code?
character.
Oh, sure, it says, routine maintenance and repairs may be performed on a structure or site, the use of which is non-conforming.
that's kind of like that, in a way, but
How tall is your current fence?
The current wire fence or my picket fence?
No, wire fence.
Oh, it's 5 feet? It's mostly chicken wires and hog wire.
non-conforming.
And this fence,
And ugly,
and this fence is essentially going to replace that.
it is.
So if he was just gonna do the repair or whatever, he wouldn't even need a permit, would he? Just asking.
No, that's exactly the question I asked myself. I didn't even know if this required a permit.
Yeah.
But again,
Just
I wanted to
replacing
set the
something.
precedent of asking for a permit.
Sure.
Are you gonna use the same posts?
No, there is old metal posts. I have to put up wood.
With the exception of Jacksonville, most communities do not require a permit for a replacement of an existing fence if it's in the same location and of the approximate same height.
I think that
That
that's
sounds
pretty
great.
accurate.
I think this has been a really helpful exercise.
I really lean on the garage being out front and
Yeah.
exempting him from that, because that's a side yard to the garage now.
All right.
So in other words, I've taken up an hour of your
Well,
time.
but-
Sorry.
but-
No.
Well, we're learning.
Practice.
We are
You
learning.
still need to document that you made this decision so that it doesn't come back to you
Right.
later and
Yeah,
somebody
that
says,
would be prudent.
you should have had a permit?
Mhm.
How do you take care of that?
And there may be other people who have similar issues.
Can I ask a question? Does
Sure.
your fence currently go as far on both ends of your property as it is right now?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, it goes all the way, both fences, north-south.
So,
And-
sorry.
Sorry, and there's an alley back there?
There is.
And there is any site restrictions, issues, anything that your car's not driving out
No, I
that
don't
way
think
either?
so. I don't think so, given all the brush and everything that grows all
But
along.
that's not
the
your
road.
back, that's not your front yard anyway, so it doesn't really matter, right? Oh.
Yeah, that
Actually-
alley's the backyard.
Actually, it
That's-
would if there's a car going out, right? It would? If there's a car coming out and going into the alley?
But still, it's not the front yard.
Yeah.
It's the
No.
rear yard.
Yeah, so front yard, by Gold Hill's definition, would be, he has a 6th Street address, so all of the property facing 6th Street would be the front yard. And the rear would be the yard off the alley, and the sides would be, you have one side that's a street side,
Yeah.
and one side that's neighboring another residential.
So no matter where your front door is, you consider the front yard the side of the address, is that?
No.
That can change from jurisdiction. It's
That's
usually the side that has a driveway on it is
Oh.
considered the front door. Some communities do require the front door to face the street that is the street address, but I don't believe that's the case in Gold Hill.
I think it may be, and the older homes have difficulty with that. 'Cause
That's a totally other issue I can
Yeah.
look into
Yeah.
later.
So
I think
does
you
anybody else
have-
have any other questions? I move that we do whatever we're supposed to do to make it a rebuild or,
Right, so now you,
Yeah.
you close your site plan review and you move on to deliberations and decisions.
okay.
Okay, so the site plan review is closed. Begin deliberation and discussion and decision.
So, does the, commission have to make motions and votes just like the council does, or is it? Yeah.
Yes.
So someone could make the motion that they consider this permit and the fence doesn't require a permit based on that code? Does that sound? I think that's what you're,
Yeah, but can you give us the code again?
yeah. 1768.
So I make the motion that we not require a permit based on code 176820.
Need a second?
I'll second it.
It's been seconded. Discussion? Seeing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Passes unanimously.
And that was the easy one.
Thank you for being
Congratulations,
so,
Mr. Lowe, you don't need a
so
permit.
like willing to like
Oh.
do what we need to do.
Oh,
That was
sure.
very kind of you.
Sure, well, that's,
Making our job very easy.
yeah. Wait till some of the really fun ones come in. They're not all so easy.
Yeah. Ryan, thank you so much. You're
Yeah.
very helpful.
Thank you.
Good practice.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
So even the simplest things are complicated.
So we're not done with the meeting yet. We still have a few more things.
Staff comments?
Yes, so the
Sorry,
reason I put
disagreed with your interpretation.
section 1706 on here. So if you've ever looked at our code book online, you may have noticed section 17 on zoning has a mix of old pages and new pages. It's, you know, there was some updates done in, was it like 2004 or something? It's been a while. And I've been working with that code book this whole time because that's what we had, and it turns out, because I was looking for something else, that when they passed the ordinance in 2004, updating these certain sections that updated the different zones and some of the rules within them, they only put a couple of those updates in the code book, and it turns out they updated like 8 sections. So Dwayne and I have been digging through all the cabinets here, and we found all of them, and so we're gonna get Title 17 revised and uploaded onto the website. However, we have been unable to locate a physical copy of Section 1706, which was also adopted that day, and it was titled Applications, and I don't remember the exact title, I should have written that down, but it was basically how you proceed with filling out an application to do these things. And it has particular relevance because of the variance issue that you're going to be hearing next. We thought maybe, since we don't know what 1706 says, that you guys could help us hash out new language for 1706 and get it adopted so that we have the actual application procedure in our code book. Or if you know anybody because you see my code book says number 19, but it's the only copy I have. Over the years, people have taken them home and not brought them back. So if you know anybody who has one, maybe they have a copy of 1706. But in the meantime, that's why this is on here. It's something that I'd like you to help me do, create this new section and get it passed so that we can have a section in the code book that actually details the application process. So that's why this is on.
That's important. It's not at COG, right? I know that all of those were worked on by Dick Converse, so.
When I started working here, I couldn't find a complete code here, but we did have a copy at the COG that we thought was complete. So that's what we scanned and helped put on the website of the city. And I don't have a record of that specific section that she's discussing, and I don't know.
Right. There were 8 sections that got revised during that same ordinance, and there only 2 of them made it into the code book.
Gosh.
So,
Okay.
right.
Okay.
So along with that, while we're talking about the code book, like Ryan said, it is accessible on the website. I can print out hard copies for you if you'd like to have one to take home, because it is important to do research. Or I can do like I did last time, although obviously I didn't email you enough sections because we jumped all over the code book tonight. But I can work with Ryan to make sure I get you the correct copies and references for your review.
And there definitely are several sections that we work with more than the rest of the municipal code, which would be
Yes.
17, 15, and 16, I believe, which are subdivision and land use sections.
Right, you're not going to deal with the whole book, you're just going to deal
Sure.
with the planning stuff, so.
So it might be important to target
Maybe I will just make you
chapters.
small binders that just have those sections in it, because it won't be nearly as much paper. And then you can have a paper reference if you want one.
Can I speak a little bit?
Yeah.
As you're thinking about this, I think one thing to keep in mind, it's a good practice to review as a planning commission what takes place in town. There's one thing I would think about though. In other jurisdictions, if somebody's adding on a porch or a really small addition, or even in most jurisdictions building a house, it's usually a really quick turnaround for a permit approval process with the city. So say Rob had come into the city today or a couple days ago, it would be too late to get on tonight's meeting agenda, so he would be essentially waiting for a month to get a fence approval. And that may be a route you choose to go for the short term, but in the long term, that's probably not a realistic expectation of a time frame for a really small type of permit. So that's just something to think about.
And that's why everything had been going to him until we discovered that it wasn't written down anywhere that that's what we were doing.
And the state of Oregon and the Department of Land and Development and Conservation have a model template code for small jurisdictions. And they do have a section that talks about type of application and the application process. That would be a really good starting point maybe for us to look at. Is that something that would work for Gold Hill? So that's something, just a bit of information where we might want to look at a starting point. If we can't find what was already.
Better than a blank slate.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are other small towns in Oregon besides us. The last thing that I want to do under staff comments, I should have put this on there, but we need to schedule your next meeting. I know you normally only hear things once a month, but we have a variance hearing that we put on hold so that we could get the planning commission in place. I would like you to schedule your next meeting for 2 weeks from now, and then we can get on a monthly schedule, but there are some petitions out there that have been waiting for like 3 months, and I'd like to get them resolved. So,
Sure.
we could continue to do Tuesdays since we're here on a Tuesday today because of the holiday, but it's ultimately up to you when you can meet.
Tuesdays work for
So
me.
Tuesday, the 27th?
Tuesday, the 27th, again at 6 p.m.
Yeah, that should work.
Jessica, just to interject here, have you mentioned to everyone that the code or the charter indicates that the meeting can't be held unless all the members are present?
So that was an error. That was because
Really?
yet another, we were using an outdated code book.
Oh, cool.
A few years back, actually it was like 20 years ago, they revised that to say a majority and not the entire commission.
Awesome.
I had been using the page from 1974, which was in my code book. Yeah, so we finally
That's
just,
great.
yeah. So this one, I have gone through, I've taken this one apart
Yeah,
several
no,
times
it's
to
fine.
put the right pages in it. Yes, that did
Okay,
used to be a
cool.
thing that all 5 of you had to be here, but like 20 years ago, they changed it. So as long as a majority is here, you're okay to hold a
So
meeting.
3.
As long as there's 3 and
As long as there's 3.
there's 100% agreement on whatever they're trying to decide.
Well, it doesn't have to be 100% agreement, but with 3 you can vote.
On the
2.
3 though. Right?
No,
No, just
no,
2 can
just
pass
to-
it?
Yes, as long as there's a majority here, so. But I encourage you all to come to every meeting.
Sure.
So are you all agreed? Because I will need to notice this one. This will be a public hearing with a script. It'll be a step up from what you did tonight, but this one turned out to be a good case study, so.
Sure, yeah.
Will we get all the background information before that evening?
You will absolutely, I will get that out to you this week because this thing has been going on for a while. I have tons of paperwork for you to start sorting through.
Okay.
Sounds
Okay.
like quite the variance.
It's a good one. It's a good one for you to cut your teeth on.
So did you just decide to meet on the 27th?
I believe so.
That would be then 2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from today.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for doing that. I appreciate it, and the petitioners appreciate it as well. That is it for me. Ryan, did you have anything else you wanted to say before we move on to commissioner comments?
I think most of you got the email from Jessica today, or it's in your spam folder. I tried to send some information that's very useful. There's one that's a planning guide for all planning commissioners in Oregon. And it's very useful, and it talks about a little bit about land use in Oregon, things like ex parte communication, how to handle a hearing, what's the appropriate role for a planning commissioner. That's a really good thing to review. It also had the statewide goals of land use, which kind of help you see the big picture.
Printed out your email.
Okay.
That's got all the links.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it also, there's some public meeting law and the link to the Attorney General's site. That's really useful when it comes to understanding how meetings are supposed to be noticed, what kind of communication can take place before or amongst you outside of a meeting. So as an elected body, it's really important that your decisions are made in open, noticed meetings. So it would be inappropriate, although it seems logical, maybe, it would be inappropriate for 3 of you to go down and look at somebody's property and talk to them and see how the project is going and help them figure it out.
Right?
You really should only be discussing amongst each other in an open meeting.
Right.
So if you have questions of staff, that's appropriate. But if you're really discussing an active application for a land use project, it'd be inappropriate to go discuss it with 2 of you at the site or at your house. You can meet socially, you can talk to people about, this is a section of the code I think we should change. That's different. If you're looking at making law, you can talk to anybody. But if you're looking at being a judge and weighing in on somebody's application, that should only happen here in a meeting that's noticed to the public.
That makes sense.
Is it, like with this fence, if we went and saw it beforehand and,
Okay.
and then, so part of it, the judgment as well, that kind of looks right to me. Would that be an inappropriate thing to do?
Not necessarily. So a fence is a very limited land use application, so we're not required to have a public hearing and follow the full process. But the next meeting will be a public hearing and we'll follow a process. So if you talk to somebody related to the project, it's not necessarily inappropriate, but you need to announce it at the meeting and discuss what you learned from that so that everybody is aware of what you learned and has an opportunity to question it or point out why it's incorrect. Also, if you visit a site and learn something other than what you see at the meeting, it's important that you point that out so others have an opportunity to question it, challenge it. So you can view things, and if you do talk to somebody, you just need to point that out at the meeting.
As long as we're talking about the rules, I want to read you one more rule. Any planning commissioner having a personal interest in any matter appearing before the planning commission or living within 300 feet of any property for which a planning decision is being made shall announce such conflict of interest on the record and abstain from consideration or voting thereon.
There's
Makes sense.
public meeting manual through the Attorney General talks about that. There are kind of two kinds of conflict of interest. There's an actual conflict of interest, like this is my husband applying, this is somebody who works for me, this is somebody I live next door to. That's an actual conflict of interest, and you should recuse yourself from participating. Unless there's a need for a quorum, and there's a process where sometimes if there's only 2 people left, you have to participate anyway. But the other kind is a potential conflict of interest. If it's, we're making a decision that's going to affect painters, and I'm a painter in town, it might affect me, but it's not really a vote that's going to directly affect me. So you're supposed to announce a potential conflict of interest so people know it could affect you. But you're supposed to step down if it's an actual conflict of interest that will affect you.
So on the variance issue, I might have a potential conflict of interest. So I talk about that now, or do I need to bring that up?
You just bring that up at the beginning of the hearing when you open it as the chair. And I'll work with Jessica to have a script for you to follow that clarifies when people should make these comments. And some of it seems, a bit much, but down the road when things become contentious, it's a really good idea and a good practice to know that you're following a legal process that's defendable and consistent and fair to everybody who comes forward.
Can we speak to a subject where we have a conflict of interest and just not vote, or are we supposed to be silent on it?
So if you have an actual conflict of interest, most jurisdictions suggest that you would actually step away from the dais and sit in the audience during that part of a meeting. And then once the decision is made, come back.
But a potential, not necessarily.
Potential, you just need to announce that you have a potential conflict, and then you can continue to discuss and vote.
This makes me think, could we get a printed guide for public officials? For everybody?
The
city-
public meeting manual?
Well, there were 2 things.
Yeah, the second one is from the Government Ethics Commission,
Uh-huh.
and it talks about conflict of interest. It talks about somebody trying to give you a bribe. It talks about all of those state things, and it's probably a 15 or 20 page report. It's very good information that covers multiple subjects.
It is,
And that's one of the documents you sent us? this
Yes.
yes. And there was something that related to planning.
The Oregon Planning Handbook
Yeah.
for Planning Commissioners from DLCD is another really good, probably a 36-page document.
Just let me know which ones you want and I'll get it
Okay.
printed out for you.
I don't think I got them either, I just checked my spam too.
I sent it to your Gmail this time.
I'm looking at my Gmail.
It's not from my city address, it's from the city manager at Gmail address. So,
Yeah, I got it, so.
I think, did you all get the one I sent today, right?
I got yours, I'm not sure I got.
Yep.
That's information
Well,
that I sent to
I sent it to
Jessica,
you.
so.
He sent it to
Oh,
me and I
okay.
forwarded it to all of you.
But maybe I just didn't print it all out.
And that's, just to reiterate, it's a key thing that sometimes gets people in trouble. It seems logical, if there's an issue you know is going to come before you, that you might call him to talk about it, and then you call her to talk about it, and you're out there talking about this thing that's going to come to a public meeting. That's really unfair. And in Oregon, it's considered illegal. So
Just don't
it
talk
seems
about
like
it.
you can make a
Well,
lot of
sure,
good
yeah.
use of your knowledge by talking about this, but in Oregon, it's really all supposed to happen here at the public meeting.
Right.
So,
That makes sense.
yeah, it does and doesn't. I think sometimes it could be a really great project that you guys all think, if we could talk about it at the coffee shop, or we could get together, we can help. But if somebody is opposed to it and realizes that happened, it can make a lot of problems for the applicant, so.
But we could individually walk on the property, like, I think tonight would have been really easy for me to probably
It's often,
visualize it better if I
it's often good
looked
for
at
a
the
planning
fence
commission to
or-
make a site visit and look at, what's the street look like, what do the neighbors look like, you know, yeah, that's appropriate.
By yourself, not as a group.
Got it.
You can do a site visit as a group if you
Just
schedule
don't
it and
talk about
notice
it?
it. No, you have to just
Oh,
notice
right, just
that
call it a public
the
meeting.
planning commission
Okay.
will be looking at the
I think there
potential
might be
development
times we
site.
might need to do that, but hopefully there were, but I think that makes sense.
Thanks for letting me talk a little bit.
No, I
It's a
appreciate
good
it.
opportunity to get some
Appreciate it.
beginning
Really
information
appreciate it.
out. so.
Thanks, Brian.
So are we at commissioner comments?
Yes, so this is a point where if any of you have any comments you want to make.
I just think you guys are doing such a great job, Jessica, you're doing an amazing job. So,
Thanks. I'm
all the
just
work that
making it
you
up.
did on the codes, and you've been really good, just great at communicating with small businesses and the community, just so you know. You're just doing a really good job, so I'm just really happy that,
Thank
thanks
you.
for going through that, I can't imagine.
Well, I live here too, you know, so.
Can't imagine what you've had to do with all, it sounds like it's been.
It's been a fun
interesting
year.
ride. Yeah,
The most exciting and challenging year of my life, for sure.
Yeah.
Many.
good. Well, it's really nice meeting all of you as well. So
Yeah.
Look forward to working with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good group.
Yeah.
So I guess no one else has any more comments? Commissioner comments? I'm guessing going forward then that the president will facilitate the meetings?
Really?
And I'll just step more into an observer role, yeah.
Well, Malia, if you wouldn't mind helping me out with that initially, that would be amazing.
Sure, whatever I can do.
So for these meetings, Jessica, would you typically put the agendas together?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
I put the agendas together.
would do
People
those.
who want to appear before you come and submit their permit requests and applications to City Hall, so then I set up the agenda for you.
And I'm gonna get a script next time.
Yes, you will have a script.
Okay.
We'll tell you every word to say.
Okay.
Except during deliberations, they won't tell you the answers.
All right.
Okay, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thanks.
Thank you all so
10
much.
minutes, not bad.
Very good.
Got some reading to do.
Straightforward.
Yeah, and if you guys just want to email me if you see any links on there that you want me to print you out a copy of, just tell me which ones you want and I'll print them and you can
Okay.
have hard copies. Unless it's like 400.